It's Wednesday, May 13th, 2026. Not a great economic day. The status of Hormuz and Makary out at FDA. Let's get right into it. A stripped-down version of the AM update this morning because I'm a moron and forgot my solid-state external drive at work. And that's got all of the elements on it. The Bureau of Labor Statistics on Tuesday said the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, it's a broad measure of how much everyday goods like gasoline, groceries, and rent cost, rose 0.6% from a month ago and is 3.8% higher than last year. That's the highest level since May of 2023. The 0.6% monthly increase was in line with expectations of economists polled by LSEG, while the annual figure was hotter than the prediction of 3.7%. Notable increases amongst categories in that CPI: fuel oil up by 54%, gasoline up by 28%, electricity up by 6%, transportation up by 4%. Those are all adjusted by different means. President Trump was asked this very loaded question about Iran and America's finances.
American financial situation, I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. You cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all.
So there's President Trump asking how much Americans' financial situations factor into what he's doing with Iran. And he says, quote, "I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all." Of course, that clip is going to be used and played and pilloried against President Trump. Of course he cares about Americans' financial situation. Of course he does. He's the president. He, more than any maybe president or political leader that I've ever seen, is acutely aware of what the polling says, what the data says, how that impacts him. Here's the reason, though. He's not just going to tell the press, who's trying to trap him there. He's not going to tell the press, oh, yeah, I'm really, really sensitive to that. In other words, yes, Iran, mullahs, if you're still alive, here's my pain point. Art of the deal, you're never going to let anybody know what your pain point or pressure point is. A loaded question. You can squabble with how you think Trump could have better messaged that answer, but that's going to be used against him, or at least attempted to use against him. Kevin Warsh has been confirmed by the Senate as a member of the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve. Vote is expected later this week after Fed Chair Jerome Powell is ousted from office. After his term ends, Kevin Warsh expected to be the next Federal Reserve chair. On the topic of the Strait of Hormuz, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Caine, testified in front of the Senate yesterday. Here's what he had to say about the current state of play.
Is it possible to keep that stranglehold on with the blockade, even though, the tyrants, the IRGC, won't give up right away and secure the Strait of Hormuz while we continue to put that pressure on them for a result that can work for this country and the world and that's enforceable? And I'd like you to give me some more color on that, both you gentlemen.
Sure, I'll take a moment here and talk about pressure. And what you're really alluding to is what the entirety of the interagency is working on, with a hat tip toward Secretary Bessent, Secretary Rubio, and the rest of the interagency. The totality of total pressure, which the military element is just one component on, is what the regime in Iran is feeling right now. And I think there's no shortage of ability to hold that pressure. The decision on for how long to hold that pressure is, of course, a political one and within our civilian leadership. But I would highlight that they are absolutely feeling that pressure, not just from the blockade, as the Secretary talked about, but the continuation of sanctions that Treasury and others have put on there. And we retain a range of military options.
So there is Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Caine, assessing the situation with Iran, saying maximum pressure is being applied, but ultimately how long that pressure is applied will be up to civilian leadership, namely President Trump and his administration. He also added as well that the ongoing situation in the Strait of Hormuz is incredibly complicated on multiple levels, not only militarily with our military, the IRGC, civilian vessels as well, the shipping companies, along with the shipping insurers. It's just a very multifaceted situation. General Dan Caine giving that update in front of a Senate panel yesterday. Let's go back home. FDA Commissioner Marty Makary submitted his resignation yesterday. Here's what President Trump has to say about his outgoing FDA chief.
Marty's a great guy. He's a friend of mine. He's a wonderful man. And he's going to be off. And the assistant, the deputy, is taking over temporarily until we find. Everybody wants that job. It's a very important job. Marty's a terrific guy, but...
So there's President Trump's assessment of his FDA Commissioner Marty Makary. Also, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Gave Makary his seal of approval as well, saying, quote, Marty, you took on the entrenched interests, challenged the status quo, and never lost sight of the American people we serve. You pushed forward critical reforms and helped advance our mission to make America healthy again. I'm grateful for your courage and your friendship, wishing you the very best in your next chapter. I also want to thank Kyle Diamatis for stepping in as acting commissioner. His leadership has already delivered remarkable wins on the MAHA food agenda, and I have full confidence in his continued work. But not everybody is very happy with now outgoing FDA Commissioner Marty Makary. Senator Josh Hawley on social media wrote this as well. This is welcome news. Dr. Makary was uniquely destructive to the pro-life movement. He attempted to place pro-abortion lawyers in key positions. He slow-walked a vitally necessary review of the abortion drug mifepristone. He used his discretion to approve a new abortion drug when the data shows it sends 1 in 10 women to the emergency room. He froze out pro-life leaders and repeatedly stonewalled Congress. His resignation is an opportunity for the FDA to reset. Speaking of baby killing, a group of 23 states have filed a legal brief with the Supreme Court to support Louisiana and its efforts to stop mail-order abortions. South Dakota has joined Nebraska and 21 other states in backing Louisiana's pro-life bid, signing an amicus brief urging the U.S. Supreme Court to uphold a stay blocking the remote distribution of mifepristone, the dangerous and prolific chemical drug used to kill babies. South Dakota Attorney General Marty Makary announced the state's participation on Tuesday. Nebraska Attorney General Michael Hilgers filed the brief on behalf of 23 states and their coalition. So that seems to be gaining some steam, the effort to block the mail-order baby-killing pill, mifepristone. In front of the Senate yesterday as well, FBI Director Kash Patel testified. Some say he is testifying for his job, and if President Trump is still swayed by sound bites, here is Senator Chris Van Hollen and FBI Director Patel's response.
The only person that was slinging margaritas in El Salvador on the taxpayer dollar with a convicted gangbanging rapist was you.
You know,
the only person that ran up a $7,000 bar tab in Washington, D.C. at the lobby bar was you. So the only individual in this room that has been drinking on taxpayer dime during the day is you.
So I would not usually feature that, but the Department of Justice has been on a tear recently, and I think anytime that there is some sort of acting chief of any agency that just shoves the hypocrisy back in the face of their Senate or House questioners, it's fair game. I like that. Let's go to this as well. Fox News' Bill Malugin reports Senate Homeland Security Committee Chairman Rand Paul says COVID-19 whistleblowers, in particular one whistleblower, will testify publicly and in person before his committee today. This person is an active CIA employee and will testify that the intelligence community has covered up the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic for years. Senator Rand Paul telling Bill Malugin at Fox, quote, I think this whistleblower will help confirm that this was known, has been known for a long time, and that when the scientists at the CIA looked into this, they discovered or they concluded that the virus had come from the lab. What we're going to find is that the cover-up is a real thing, that there are members of the community, the intelligence community, that still don't want the truth to come out. Earlier this week, the statute of limitations ran up on prosecuting for whatever crime. Anthony Fauci, former director of NIAID. Always got those mixed up. Let's go to this. Senator Cory Booker with a completely tone-deaf statement here on MS Now, talking about the need to stand up to Trump.
We know that Susan Collins has voted with the Democrats on this. Are you having any conversations behind closed doors with other Republicans? Do you feel confident that you could get one of these measures passed through at some point with some bipartisan support?
Well, we know we're on the right side of the American people who don't approve this war. We know we're on the right side of history, that this will go down as another unnecessary, disastrous quagmire in the Middle East. We are in the right here. And so, yes, I'm having conversations, very strong ones, as much as possible to let people know that it is safe to stand up against this president.
Safe to stand up. I'm having conversations, strong conversations. It's safe to stand up to President Trump. Laugh all you want. Laugh all you want. That type of statement actually is necessary. It's necessary. If I were anyone, especially a Democrat, trying to stand up to Donald Trump, I would feel in danger. I would. Mostly because of other Democrats who keep trying to shoot at him. International news. This story, did you see this story? CNN had it originally. There was apparently a Russian ship that sank mysteriously off the coast of Spain at one point. We're now being told, thanks to the CNN investigation, and when was the last time that CNN actually did a journalisming? CNN says that this Russian cargo ship was carrying nuclear technology to their friends in North Korea, including possible nuclear reactors. And at one point, it just mysteriously sank in the Mediterranean. Things that make you go, I believe it sank back in 2024, I think is when I saw. That's an interesting story. Also, this is a sad story from across the pond. A retired pastor, 78 years old, has been convicted and fined for preaching a gospel sermon near a hospital in Northern Ireland. Clive Johnston said to media, "I was deeply saddened by the verdict. At 78 years old, I never imagined I would leave a courtroom with a criminal conviction for preaching the Christian gospel. But beyond the personal impact, my overriding concern is what this says about the state of fundamental freedoms in our nation." On May 7th, District Judge Peter King at Coleraine Magistrates Court convicted Johnston of breaching a safe access zone outside Causeway Hospital in Coleraine on July 7th of 2024. Northern Ireland's abortion service, that would be safe access zones, the Abortion Services Act, prohibits influencing, preventing, or impeding access or causing harassment, alarm, or distress to protected persons within 100 meters or 328 feet of facilities where abortions are performed. The 78-year-old pastor, Pastor Clive Johnston, who is now a criminal in the eyes of Ireland, spoke after the verdict came down and said what he was preaching about had nothing to do with baby killing.
I think this is a very dark day for Christian freedom. We held a short, brief, open-air Sunday service near Coleraine Hospital. We made no reference whatsoever to abortion, and yet the buffer zone law is so broad that holding a Sunday service has been found to be a criminal offence. At 78 years, I find myself for the first time convicted of a crime. I know it was an unusual place to hold an open-air service, but that was the point. There shouldn't be any public spaces in Northern Ireland where you can be prosecuted and convicted simply for preaching the gospel.
You know, if Democrats get back in control again, leftists get back in control again, we've already seen these stories during the Biden administration here stateside. It's not exactly a new thing, but I have to think this is going to get ratcheted up to 11. Finally, this morning, let's talk about this quickly. The State Department declared this week the United States is not participating in something called the United Nations Review of the Global Compact on Migration. Here's what the State Department said, quote, "The United States objects to the Global Compact on Migration and UN efforts to facilitate replacement migration to the United States and our Western allies. UN agencies systematically facilitated mass migration into America and Europe, even as citizens of those nations called for restrictions on migration. Now, the Global Compact's latest report urges nations to expand migration pathways and pursue regularization of migrants. UN agencies working with the NGOs they fund established a migration corridor through Central America and to the U.S. border. As the American people suffered under an unprecedented wave of mass migration, the UN was on the ground pipelining migrants to our southern border. The Post goes on, isn't that something, though? If any average Joe Blow working in some sort of white-collar job, finance, media, just an average person working in a non-political, meaning that they are, basically politically correct, working in a white-collar job had said something like this, that our State Department is now declaring as official policy of the United States. We're not joining on to this compact on global migration. If a Joe Blow had said something like that, replacement migration, he would have gotten canceled, fired, life ruined, just like 5-10 years ago. So that is something. However, something that is continuing to be a topic or kind of a subtopic is the issue of domestic policy. As I said, yesterday was not a great economics day. Some of that inflation numbers. I also saw data showing that inflation for the first time, I think since 2023, outpaced real wage growth. That's not good. Just not good. Meanwhile, and this is part of what the games the media likes to play. So I'm not super critical of this, but it seems like the only thing that President Trump really talks about these days, Iran, in recent days, Russia, in coming days, China. That's the topic of this week's kind of tongue-in-cheek poll of the week. What country would you rather talk about? Iran, Russia, or China? Or the ability to comment and say what you want? I already see a lot of responses on this one. That's the poll of the week. Find it at Real AM Update on X. Thanks for listening to this watching this stripped-down version of the AM Update. We'll catch you again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntyre, and this is the AM Update.